that may put you in danger? How about a household without rules? Do you dare to live there? So the most quoted study on parenting styles came from UC Berkeley back in the 1970s. So as you can see, they studied the style, the interaction between parents versus children on two dimensions. One dimension is demandness. So how demand, are there any rules, any responsibilities the children are asked to take? So the demandness, and the other dimension is responsiveness or warmth, like how well they respond to children's needs. So demand is from parent to children. Do they have any standards or expectations for the children to meet, responsibilities for them to fulfill? Or do they respond to the children's needs? When the children need them, do they provide the psychological or physical warmth? And so on these two dimensions, there are basically four different kinds of parents. One kind is very high in demand, but very low in warmth. So which means they have lots of rules and expectations. They expect the children to listen to them. But the children do not have a lot of chance to share what they want because they need to follow the rules. And they're a very small, very little warmth. So that's called authoritarian. So that's the bottom right corner. So authoritarian. So that's similar to how I grew up in China, the traditional type of parenting in China. I am 47 years old. So people like me, if your parents are in my range of age, they were raised basically by authoritarian parents. And that's the only way that we are familiar with. There's also two kinds. They are very low on demandness, which means they have very little rules. One is permissive, one is uninvolved, which means they really have no rules in their house. Whenever you want to go to bed, you go to bed. If you're late for school, that's okay. So just, I worked with many of the children in my public schools. I still remember there was a 13-year-old who always come to my class, to my office for breakfast because he always came in with such bagged eyes, and I'll ask him, when did you go to bed? Oh, I don't know, maybe 3 a.m. What did you do? I play games. So there's no rule in his household. He can play game as long as he wants, and he doesn't have breakfast. He just, whenever he gets up and he walks to school, and I have a box of cereal for him. So permissive and uninvolved, the difference is that permissive type of parents at least give them lots of warmth, lots of responsiveness. If they want something, I want an iPad. Okay, you get it. So they love the children, but there's no rules. And then uninvolved is that they have no expectation and very little warmth. They don't give the children what they want. So that type of parents we rarely see. But permissive, take a guess. Now, of course, the best part is authoritative. Authoritative, they have the demandness, they also have the responsiveness, which means, yes, they have clear rules and consistent rules in their house. They also are very responsive to their children's needs. If the children said that, you know what, Dad, I disagree and these are my reasons, and they'll listen. They'll say, let's come to a middle ground. So that's the authoritative. Of course, they did longitudinal study to say which style of parenting leads to the most successful and the happiest children when they are in their adulthood. And after the longitudinal study, they found out the authoritative style of parenting lead to the most successful and happiest children. But take a guess, permissive versus authoritarian. So which one of these two had more successful and happier adults in the future? You'll be surprised. You probably think that the kind that has no rules but only meeting the children's needs without any expectations. But the result is that authoritarian. So the style of parent who actually have demands, have expectations, but less warmth, they raised more successful children. The only difference between the authoritarian and authoritative parenting, the only difference between the children from these two different styles is that children growing out of the authoritarian style of parenting, they have less happiness. So they're like me. They have very conscientious attitude towards learning and their job. They can keep a job steadily. They work really hard to raise a family, but they don't, because they were criticized so much or asked to do things without autonomy. They rarely feel the sense of happiness or satisfaction. So that's the only difference. But the children from permissive style of parenting, imagine they had no rules in their house, and they open the door, they go anywhere. There are rules everywhere. It's impossible for them to be happy. So they're not used to taking responsibilities or meeting high expectations. And then suddenly in school or workplace, there are rules and expectations everywhere. So those children growing out of the permissive type of household, they actually are less successful and less happy than the other two, the authoritative and authoritarian. It's a learning process. As I share with you, give your parents a chance to learn so that one day they will be like the authoritative. I think once they know what's best for their children, they will make a special effort to become, demanding and responsive. So they will have consistent, realistic, and reasonable goals and rules in their house, and they also respond to your needs. For example, for your need to be respected and loved. So as a teenager, you know why your parents set up the rules to raise you? Because your brain is still developing. Your brain is not fully developed, at least until age 25. So your brain is approaching the peak of cognitive learning. So your memory, comprehension, your reasoning skills for math, this kind of learning abilities is rapidly increasing at peaks around the early 20s. So I'm 47. If I sit in the classroom, learn new things together with you, with a 19, 20-year-old, I'll never learn more than them because they simply are faster. They're better in memorization. So their cognitibility is approaching to the peak. But what they're lacking, they're like a car with the engine fully developed without the brake. So the part of the brain that developed the slowest is the frontal lobe. It's frontal lobe is unfortunately the controller. So they predict the danger. They plan ahead for things. So that's the part that's actually less developed. It's not fully developed until at least age 25 or even later for male. So your brain's still developing. And this is another study by Harvard Medical School. As you can see, from age 5 all the way to 20, the only part that is not fully developed, still brain-ish, is the frontal lobe, is this part. So shows us that so this many different areas of studies shows what does that mean. So that means that, for example, the peak age of offense, like what's the age where the crime rate is the highest? It's age 17, not because you want to be bad, but because simply your brain cannot predict the risk. Exciting things make it appealing to you. And a lot of that involve risks. In your brain, the frontal lobe part that can predict the risk is not fully developed, so you cannot plan ahead very well. And also another example, procrastination. Look at these two circles here. So the total population, only about 20% have procrastination. But for students, they did a study in both China and America, the college students. the results are very consistent. 85 to 95% of college students procrastinate. Yeah, have procrastination. That's how big the age make a difference in the way we plan ahead and get things done accordingly. So understand that your brain is still developing. So in other words, responsibility is the price of freedom. The more responsible you are, the more freedom you should get. And if we can keep a balance between the responsibility and the freedom, that's when we develop the best. With that in mind, I want you to think about this lesson's assignment. I want you to list the rules at your household and then identify each one's function. For example, the function of bedtime at 10:30 p.m. is to, trust me, it's not to annoy you or bother you. There's a reason why. Think about what we talked about in positive emotion side. Why we have a fixed bedtime in our house, or I should say in a most responsible households. So once you recognize that rules are to protect your safety and health, for example, why your parents say that no screen during mealtime, there's a reason. What's the reason? I want you to identify the function, the reason behind each rule. And once you recognize that, and then I want you to see the impact on your relationship with the parents at home. Again, your parents are learning too. If there are any rules you feel is unreasonable, have a good talk with your parents and share with them. Or if you feel like, oh, my mom and dad may get angry, write to them, put in writing and email them. So they want the best for you. If they feel like, oh, wow, from now on, I need to communicate with my child like adult because they're 13 or 14, they have their own understanding of the world and they need my help. And sometimes my way of communication is not the best or most efficient to help them grow. They will change and they will learn and they will grow. They will get better. Trust them. All right. So thank you so much for those who are watching on the YouTube. I'm going to turn off now and turn to those who are at the webinar so we can proceed with our Q&A. Thanks again for your interest in this series of classes. I'll see you next class.